So, we've got something a little bit special for today's episode. Today, I'm joined by Lynda Lovatt of Lynda Lovatt Lady Talk, and we're talking about the power of your pelvic floor. So, this episode is one for the ladies or for anyone who has a special lady in their life, because we're talking about your pelvic floor, what it is, how to take care of it, when you should be seeking professional help, and also things that you can ask your GP or your personal trainer to make sure that your fitness protocol is working for your pelvic floor. Let's get started, shall we?
Well, hello, beautiful people, and welcome to the Project Joyful podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Tuttig, your medical herbalist and high performance coach. So, hey, Project Joyful isn't just about being happy. It's about consciously creating a life you love. It's about remembering how to reconnect with your soul-centered joy. You know, that joy that comes from doing what you love, from living on purpose, and from being in a life that allows you to experience deep joy moment by moment. So, hey, let's get started, shall we?
So, joining me today is Lynda Lovatt. Lynda Lovatt is a registered nurse and a registered personal trainer who focuses on women's health and fitness from 40 years and up. Lynda brings 30 years of experience to her new business, Lady Talk, which was designed to ease the conversation into the taboo topics in women's health. Lynda's passionate about pelvic health across your lifespan and women's healthy aging because she's had 13 years' experience working on the front line, both in New Zealand and in British hospitals. For the last 10 years, Lynda's worked in the fitness industry as a personal trainer, but last year Lynda returned to nursing at Wellington Hospital Gynecology and as a practice nurse before starting up Lady Talk. Lynda has an enormous amount of knowledge on women's health. She relays this in her private consultations in person in Wellington, New Zealand, or on Zoom nationwide. And she runs workshops and podcasts on taboo topics in women's healthy aging. We welcome Lynda to the Project Joyful podcast today because we're going to be talking about pelvic floor muscle and how it impacts you over your lifespan. Hey, Lynda, welcome. So good to talk to you again.
Thanks, Tracy, for having me. It's so neat to be here.
Oh, we're going to be in for a treat, I can tell. So let's start off just by talking about what exactly is this thing called a pelvic floor?
I know it's a really weird term, right? And when I first sort of heard pelvic floor, I was actually pregnant myself. And my midwife said to me, "Oh, make sure you exercise your pelvic floor." And I'd never really heard much about it. Even though I was a nurse and I was thinking, oh, one of those key moments in life when you're supposed to know what you're doing and no one had mentioned it. So how do you even know how to do it? And I sort of thought the word pelvic floor sounded like a floor. Like, what does that even mean? So it wasn't until I learnt a lot more down the track where I realised what the pelvic floor was and what it did. And I mean, it is a floor in terms of the fact that it's the base of your pelvis. So it's the floor of your pelvis. So that's sort of where it comes into the floor word, which I think sort of floors everybody, and people think, God, what on earth? And then if you add muscle to it, so pelvic floor muscle, then people know that muscle can get a bit tight or a bit. So that sort of adds a bit more meaning to it, doesn't it?
I like that. And it's kind of like, when you're at the gym and you're working a muscle, it gets a little bit more tone and a little bit more tight and action to it. Is that the same thing with a pelvic floor muscle?
Yeah, so it can get too tight and it can get
Mm,
a bit weak as well. And there's lots of things that impact it. And childbirth's one of them.
right.
But there's functions to your pelvic floor, which I can go through as well, which helps people to understand the importance of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people, like you say, we hear about, you need to keep your pelvic floor in good shape, especially as you get older. What exactly does that mean? What's good shape for a pelvic floor? What should we be looking for?
Yeah, keeping it in shape. I mean, I think the things are probably to explain, first of all, as the functions of it and then what can go wrong.
Oh, yeah, good idea.
So some of the things that can that it does is it helps to stabilize you. So it's like it increases the stability between your pelvis and your lumbar spine. It helps with sexual sensation and function, which is important, right?
Absolutely.
Helps to maintain your continence. So that means keeping your wee and your poo in. And it also helps to support your pelvic organs. But your pelvic floor is one of your core muscles. So it also works with your diaphragm and your deep abdominal muscles and your deep back muscles. So those muscles can all work independently, but they can work collectively. They're like friends. So they can work together and they work well together. So that's sort of what the pelvic floor does. And it gets a bit of a hit over the woman's lifespan, especially when you hit 50. So some of the things that can go wrong is we can start to leak urine. So 1 in 3 women will leak urine.
It's such a common thing. I know I see a lot of patients and they start talking about, how they're coughing and they're sneezing, especially when cold and flu season in the winter. And suddenly, this sort of thing starts turning up and they're a bit confused about it.
Yeah, so we've got, you and me here, so that's 2. And 1 in 3 is pretty, there's quite a few women who suffer from it. And I know that my pelvic floor has changed over my lifespan, and I've certainly had a bit of urinary incontinence as well.
Very
But
common.
we don't talk about it, and that's what Lady Talk's all about, is easing the conversation into those sorts of things, because women need to get it nipped in the bud and not put up with it. So 1 in 3, women will pee when they don't want to, and 1 in 5 will have pain during sex.
So that's not necessarily related to menopause then, is it? It could be pelvic floor related.
Yeah, so when menopause hits, we get different changes to the pelvic floor, again, which is more hormonal, which can cause these issues to resurface or to start as well. So lots of changes happen to those vulvo-vaginal tissues, and the muscles start to thin and atrophy slightly as well. So we can get more increased incidence of urinary incontinence, but also bowel issues. So I think the stats are about 1 in 10 or 11 will poo their pants when they don't want to, or they poo when they don't want to.
That's tough.
That's quite scary, right?
Yeah.
Like, and people get more sort of socially isolated and they don't want to go out because they worry about where the toilet is.
Yeah, and it's a tough thing to talk about your doctor with as well, right?
Yeah, it is a tough thing to talk about, but it needs to be managed, and people need to be able to do what they want to do.
Yeah, totally.
It becomes quite self-limiting. The other stat is 50% of women who give birth will have prolapse, so their pelvic organs can start to descend, and that sort of increases per vaginal birth as well. So that's a big one for women, and you can be asymptomatic with that. And there's certainly a lot of risk factors for it as well, even if you haven't had babies before.
And if you did have symptoms of a prolapse, what would those symptoms be?
Usually just a feeling of heaviness or a dragging sensation. Some people feel like they're sitting on a tennis ball. They can feel sort of visibly there. I mean, it can come below the introitus level, so that's where the entrance to the vagina is. It can hang a little bit lower than that, but that's quite a severe prolapse. But these things need to be looked at because they impact on so much. The way that we lift things at home, our everyday activities, but also exercise at the gym. Those sorts of things become harder to do, or people will steer away from it because they're worried about it. But there's so much you can do to help.
It's interesting, It becomes a circular reference because you start getting the pelvic floor irregularity, so you stop going to the gym or you stop going out, or all the things that can help your pelvic floor health. And so it's like chicken and egg, isn't it? At the risk of overusing eggs.
Yes, yeah, it's an important conversation to have, and I think I was going to raise this later on, but all personal trainers, who are seeing women, or any gym or exercise facility that's exercising women, to be asking about that muscle as well. They'll say, what sort of injuries have you got? They don't sort of say, oh, how's your vagina? But then there's a muscle there, right? And it's your core, and lots of things can happen to it. And then that would affect your ability to squat or lift heavy things. Run around the block or do a group fitness class where everyone's jumping on the floor or using a skipping rope. And women often say, I've got a sore knee. And they'll stop exercising or they run off to the toilet. I mean, the number of women who go off to the toilet before an exercise class, if you watch, women will like in droves to the toilet.
That's
because
me.
they're going to be doing something that's a bit beyond them and they might leak.
Yeah.
But they're not saying, they sort of go off to the toilet and then they say, oh, I've got a bit of a sore knee, I won't do my star jumps today.
Yeah.
But really, because I've seen so much of pelvic floor dysfunction and issues, I'm sort of quite conscious of Oh, I definitely ask the questions. So people who see me, I sit down with them for a whole hour and we go over the whole birth thing
Yeah.
in the pelvic history because it's just so important.
Oh, super
Yes.
important. And what are the risk factors associated with how well or how not quite so well your pelvic floor is functioning? What sort of
Yes,
things
so
can turn up?
there's actually a huge list. I probably won't be covering everything off, but
Mm,
a hysterectomy. So if you've had a hysterectomy, you're missing a pelvic organ.
mm,
So the pelvic organs like the bladder and the bowel and the uterus are friends, and they all sort of sit tightly packed within the pelvis. And the uterus is the middle organ. So when that organ is being taken away in surgery, then there's like a hole, right? There's
mm,
a gap. There's a
mm,
gap in there. And then suddenly you've got the bladder one side and you've got the bowel the other side, and they're missing the middle guy. So those organs can easily fall in and down. That's what prolapse is. It's falling out or down of an organ.
right.
So you've got, basically the bladder and the bowel sitting there without the middle guy anymore.
Yeah.
So they've lost their sort of best friend in the middle. And then you can get a vaginal vault prolapse as well. It's when your vagina starts to fall down on itself as well. So that's some of the risk factors are around hysterectomy. So if anyone says they've had a hysterectomy, well, then you need to be asking them questions about have they had their pelvic floor checked and how are things feeling downstairs?
Mm,
And they may not be symptomatic. That's the thing.
mm,
So it's just a risk factor. And then what's happened over their life before that? Endometriosis is a risk factor as well because that can cause pelvic floor tension or tension in the pelvis, primarily because of pain. Like endometriosis is a painful condition, and women get a lot of pain with periods
yeah.
and can hold tension in their pelvis.
Yeah.
Also, the endometrium takes off outside the uterus and lays adhesions everywhere, all around the pelvis as well, which is all impacting. Constipation is a big one. I mean, a lot of people go through life with having bouts of constipation, but straining on the loo causes intra-abdominal pressure. So it puts pressure on our organs.
Got increases the risk of prolapse.
Yeah.
Mm,
So you're forcing something out, you're putting pressure
yeah.
on your pelvic organs. So trying to keep your motions soft and easy to pass is always a trick and something that we aim to do. And, keeping your feet elevated on the loo to make a poo easy to pass is a good thing to do as well, and relaxing your tummy and your
Mm.
pelvic floor.
Taking time, right? It's not something to be
Taking
rushed in
time.
between the 63 tasks we've got to do that day.
Yeah, and go when you first feel the urge, like, when your body sort of says, oh, I think I might have something to do on the toilet. Well, go then,
Yeah.
rather than sort of holding it back, because it's always easier to pass when you first get that urge rather than waiting half an hour to do the dishes first or something.
Yeah.
Yes, being overweight, a history of back pain. Back pain can be a cue for maybe prolapse as well. Heavy lifting at work if you're someone who lifts heavy things. Having a chronic sneeze or a cough, like you mentioned before, I think.
Mm.
As people often will sneeze and they'll be able to do one marvelously, but then they get a concertina of like 2 or 3 sneezes in a row and it's all over. It's
Yeah.
like, and that's Olympic level, right? That's Olympic level for the pelvic floor. If you're going to sneeze, it's like a violent sort of explosion. And, your pelvic floor has to be able to react quickly.
Yeah.
And also coordinate in a hurry. And that's a learned behaviour, but we can practice that in the absence of sneezing so we can actually get that muscle on quickly so we don't pee our pants in the middle of the supermarket when we're getting the rice off the shelf and a sudden sneeze comes.
Oh, that's interesting. How do we practice it without the sneeze? What do we do?
So before, I probably didn't quite mention, but the pelvic floor's got some quick reacting fibres in it to react quickly, but it also has to support our pelvic organs all day. So that's our sort of slower twitch fibres. So to activate our quick twitch ones, we have to sort of try and think about a good cue for getting your pelvic floor to go. So some of the ones I've thought about that work really well with women is to think about a tampon, because most women have used a tampon over their lifespan somewhere.
Yeah.
And if we consider that in situ and thinking about squeezing and lifting a tampon, because the muscles squeeze and the other ones that are deeper in the pelvis, that are beta ani muscles, they lift. So if we can squeeze and then lift a tampon, then that's quite a good cue that most women get. You
Very
want to feel a
relatable.
bit of a squeeze. Can you feel that now?
Yeah, I'm actually squeezing as we speak. My body's like, okay, let's squeeze.
Yes. So practicing that sort of squeezing action, and then you should feel a lift, like a squeeze, and then a lift happening. And you want that lift happening up towards your rib cage. And that's something you need to practice that because, we don't always do it, do we? And I certainly didn't do it. And when you've had babies, like, it's just like, okay, another job to do.
Yeah,
And
last thing on your mind.
Yeah, and everything's been a bit trauma down there as well, like, episiotomies or big stretches, and your pelvic floor muscles had a bit of a workout at that point. It's carried a baby for 9 months. So it's just giving yourself some time to do it and practice it, but getting that on before you sneeze. Stop multitasking. So if you're giving the groceries off the shelf and you're walking at the same time and then you're trying to do a sneeze, it's going to be harder.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard to do, but practice it. Does that help?
Yeah, that's so good. I love that. I'm going to be doing that every day. How often should we do it? Is it like a daily thing, 4 times a day?
Yeah, keep on practicing it. Practice it at rest. Practice it in sitting, lying, standing, and then practice it under activity. So when you're lifting things off the floor. Yeah. So, and also when you're lifting things, you can be breathing out. So if you can think about you lifting your pelvic floor up and breathing out at the same time, because we know that our diaphragm, as I said before, is part of your core. So if you can breathe out as you lift your pelvic floor, then it's like you're getting a bit more protection and a bit more bang for your buck happening, because when your pelvic floor comes on, when you breathe out. So that's quite a good cue as well. But you just keep on practicing it, and you want to get those little quick holds happening, so little quick reactions. You do about 10 of those, like lift and relax. So you want to lift it. Say we go for 2 or 3 seconds lifting it up, and then you want to relax it for as long as you've lifted it for. Some women are tight in their pelvic floors and they need to work more on the relaxation component.
And how do you relax it? How do you know it's being relaxed? Especially if you're a chronic overholder, right?
Yeah, sometimes you don't know. So that's when a pelvic floor physio is really good, because they can assess your pelvic floor muscle internally and see what your resting tone is like in your pelvic floor. So they can assess that on internal examination.
And are they the ones who give you the pelvic floor check? Like, how else do you get that pelvic floor check done?
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, you can, at the hospital, you can go and see pelvic health physios at the hospital, but usually it's because you've had a baby and you can get in there if you've had quite a bad degree tear.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it is a private service. But there is funding now for women who have had some birth trauma sustained. So there's ATC funding that's come through now for women. That was in October last year. So you can get it funded. But that's mostly for birth trauma rather than just anyone going in. But it's an essential check to have done, because you know how you have a cervical smear, or you might have a mole map done, or a mammogram. It's one of those basic women's checks that you should get done, where you can check the resting tone of your pelvic floor, how strong it is. Like, it's measured from 0 being hard, nothing happening at all in the pelvic floor, to 5 being top strength. And also look at your prolapse levels as well, and no grade as well, and where your bladder's sitting, where your uterus is sitting, and where your bowel is, and where that's all sitting, and whether it's bulging through the back of the vaginal wall. So that's why it's good to get those things checked. Yeah,
great. You also mentioned that there is like numerous risk factors. What are the other more common risk factors associated with pelvic floor function?
Childbirth is probably the biggest hit to a woman's pelvic floor, and it doesn't matter whether you've had a cesarean section or a vaginal birth. The fact that you've carried a baby, amniotic fluid, placenta, that's all loading to the pelvic floor. So pregnancy is big. I mean, by the end of it, right, you've got a great big baby sitting there, and you've got a whole lot of amniotic fluid and placenta, and that's all weighing down and loading through the pelvic floor. So even pregnancy in itself can cause, especially in the last stages, urinary incontinence, and you can get prolapse as well happening. So that's probably the biggest hit. And then vaginal birth, and you've got to push that baby out into the work. But the pelvic floor is quite stretchy, and it's designed to for the baby to come out of it. So it's supposed to open up and relax. But it's quite good to see pelvic health physio when you're pregnant too, because they can see that you're able to relax that pelvic floor out, and that it's a good nip to start off with. And it just helps so much with your confidence to birth and get your baseline pelvic floor exercises happening.
Yeah.
So you've muscle memory for that before they say to you, once you've had a baby, right, do your pelvic floor exercise, and then you go, nah.
My what?
My what? Sorry. I've got silent at the moment and I can't even get it to go. So
Yeah.
if you have the muscle memory for that, that's really to your advantage as
Yeah.
well. Yeah, so childbirth itself, an older mum over 35, as you get older, your muscles get a bit stiff, not as flexible. So the older you are birthing, the more risk factors you have. A big baby over 4 kilos is quite a big baby to pass out vaginally.
Right.
So any big baby is another risk factor. Previous vaginal births. So if you've had a couple of vaginal births and you go on to your third one, just getting things checked out. If you've never seen a pelvic health physio before, it's good to go and get that pelvic floor checked before you go and have your sort of third baby in a row. Instrumental delivery, so using forceps or ventouse extraction to get a baby out is sort of mechanical and pulling down on the pelvic floor. Tearing. So tearing can go anywhere. It can be labial, can be clitoral, it can be down to the back passage, down to the anal sphincter. And that's all scar tissue and involving other areas in the woman's anatomy. So it's always good to ask women what sort of degree of tearing they've had.
Yeah.
As well, even a personal trainer in the gym, because that's a risk factor.
Yeah.
A big baby's head circumference, baby position in the pelvis as it comes out. And cesarean section is major surgery. So 7 layers of tissue are incised to get the baby out.
Yeah.
Major surgery, and that can cause a bit of a disruption to the core connection as well.
Yeah.
So lots of risk factors. Yeah, and growing older and then menopause as well. So
not much.
Not much at all, really. No.
And for any of our ladies who are listening, or the other the gentlemen, the other people in our ladies' lives who are thinking, actually, this is really interesting, and this is something that I would like to support my lady with. When should they be seeking professional help?
So if something's going wrong, so it's good to know your risk factors. So I think being aware of your risk factors that I've just listed out is good, because you can be asymptomatic.
Yeah.
So you can have a list of risk factors and go, well, I haven't got prolapse because I can't feel anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got no tennis ball there or anything. So it's important to actually know your risk factors. But then if you're leaking urine.
Yeah. And leaking urine, even like if it's a sneeze or a cough, as opposed to, other events that aren't triggered by some sort of pressure.
Yeah, so it can be like urge incontinence, like you put the key in the door or you hop in the shower and it's all on. So there's different types of incontinence. So that's not normal either. Like you should be able to, get in the door and get to the loo without that strong urgency. So that's to be nipped in the bud, because it can get worse. Any leaking of urine, any leaking of poo, and even wind. Like if you can't hold a fart in, that's sort of like you should be able to do that, like lifting up through your anal sphincter and holding that fart in. We're getting down to nitty gritty here, but
that's all right.
You asked the question, and then so and prolapse. So any prolapse symptoms, and yes, that's the main thing. So anything that's going on down there that's active, it's feeling weird, to go and see. So you can start the conversation at your GP practice. You can speak to your practice nurse,
right,
or your GP, or go into a pelvic health physio, or mention it to someone at the gym if you're exercising and you're leaking. You need to be saying something. And a lot of women, I know now that are sort of in their 50s, they are saying, actually no star jumps today. It's not sort of,
not a star jump day.
I can't do that level. And, your menstrual cycle's impacting on that as well. And whereabouts you are at in your menstrual cycle changes your ability to do high level stuff as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for our people who are exercising, whether that's in the gym, at home, in the yoga or Pilates studio, what sort of things should they be thinking about when they're doing their exercise or starting an exercise protocol?
So we're talking about post childbirth, or are we just talking about women in general?
Women
Or
in general.
yeah, I think you need to be assessed. So before you enter the exercise arena,
Yeah.
I'd love to see all personal trainers sit down with women and have a list of questions that takes around about an hour to go through,
Mm,
which covers pelvic health. Like you can speak about pelvic health easily for an hour to cover off the risk factors, especially women who are heading to 50 because they've had quite a few hits to that pelvic floor by then.
yeah.
And now they've got more menopausal changes. So assessment is key. And then knowing why you're asking the questions, looking at referral out to pelvic health physiotherapy, for example, if someone's got something going on
Yeah.
or risk factors. So that's where it needs to start. And if someone's got active pelvic floor dysfunction, you can do what is more pelvic floor safe exercise. So thinking about being kinder to their pelvic floor. So a squat, for example, you wouldn't go and put a big barbell on someone's shoulders and then get them to do a wide, deep squat, because a wide, deep squat is obviously you've got your legs well apart,
Mm,
stretching that pelvic floor out, and you're loading it. And then you're squatting down on it, and then you've got a bar on your shoulder. So that's sort of like, next level. So that's almost like Olympic level.
mm,
So what you do with a woman who want to do some nice little squats, I mean, squats is a functional exercise, and we squat every day.
yeah.
Not to get to the toilet, we squat to pick up our groceries off the floor. So squatting is an everyday movement. So we need to
Mm,
be able to functionally do it. But we can lower the depth of the squat, or maybe bring your legs a bit closer together, or not load it so much.
right.
But it's also thinking about getting your pelvic floor on during the hardest part of a movement. So when you come out of a squat, you really want to be lifting your pelvic floor up.
Right. And lifting it up using the visualization we talked about before, right? Which is imagining that Tampax in there.
Yeah, but trying to do that before you sort of load yourself, like sort of actually just stand there and do it. And you have a few practice goes of that, because it's not sort of innate and people don't always know how to do it. And then you
Yeah.
them under load, and then you're saying, "Well, do it now." And it's like, well, I haven't done that in my entire life. And so you have
Mm,
to think about where people are at. This is new information for most people. It's not like
yeah.
it's
It's not
they
talked
know.
about, which is why it's what you do is so important.
Yeah, so it's important to lift that pelvic floor muscle up and activate it, like when you're coming out of a squat, and then breathe out. So breathe. Don't breath hold. So if you breath hold, you're putting more pressure on.
Yeah.
Um, so you really want to breathe out as you do a hard thing. Really good resource for all the sort of stuff is pelvic floor first. So if you Google pelvic floor first, there's heaps of resources in there,
Mm,
all about this sort of stuff and pelvic floor safe exercise options and what to do post hysterectomy. And there's a whole lot of stuff there. Great
nice.
resource for women and men, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. And I understand that you are going to be starting a whole schedule of workshops talking about women's health. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so these are coming up in September, and I'm really excited about these. So these will become staple or signature lady talk workshops.
Mm,
The first one's a lot of vagina, and I know it's a sort of a funny name, but I wanted to make it sort of slightly humorous and interactive and educational. So that will be about the vagina and the changes to it over the lifespan.
mm,
And I'm passionate about that because I've seen what can go wrong in women's bodies, especially from working in gynecology last year and from recovering women from childbirth for the last 10 years. I've seen a lot of what can go on, and
mm.
also working as a practice nurse, seeing lots of cervical smears as well. So there'll be things about cervical smears and about things to look for vulval cancer. But we'll go into sort of a bit more depth about how to contract your pelvic floor, how to get it on during exercise, and what is important for you during menopause
Mm,
with exercise. And so we'll do exercise in the session as well. Yeah, and I want it to be a private sort of space where people feel that they can share
mm,
stories, because everyone's got a story,
mm.
and private and personal. But I'm all about easing the conversation. So I'm passionate about women getting themselves seen and sorted. So,
Nice.
so that's the first one, a lot of vagina, and the second one is more than menopause. which covers menopause, and I'll be coming fresh off conference then, so I'll be off the menopause conference down in Queenstown, plus fresh back from Melbourne, which is a lifestyle conference as well, looking at women's healthy aging. So my head will be full of it. So you'll get a big dose of fresh information about menopause and about women's healthy aging and prevention of disease for women. So heart, osteoporosis, dementia, so much we can do in our lifestyle to prevent those.
So important.
Yeah, especially postmenopausally when we haven't got estrogen protecting our body anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if someone listening is interested in participating in your workshop, how do they get in touch with you and how do they get hold of that workshop? So
I think you're going to put a link in the end of this podcast too. That would be quite good for people to click on to. But it's Lady Talk website. So Lynda Lovatt, ladytalk.co.nz is my website. And people can go onto there and see my workshops and what I offer, which is I just do podcasts as well and workshops and also personal consultations online on Zoom or here in C2 Wellington.
And you do loads of stuff on Instagram, lots of really helpful information. What's your Instagram handle?
So I'm on Instagram as well. I'll give you that link in the end of this podcast. I haven't got it with me, but yeah, Lynda Lovatt, Lady Talk.
Beautiful.
Is on Instagram and also Facebook, and I'm on LinkedIn as well. So yeah, I'm around the place.
Love it. Thank you, Lynda. Thank you so much for telling us all about the pelvic floor. And so looking forward to your workshops. They're going to be amazing. And, we just need to keep this conversation going, right?
Yeah, it's really important. I think it's important for women to know all of these things and to get things seen and not just carry on.
Yeah.
Because things can get worse as we get older, and I sort of spent my life in my early years of nursing and rest homes with old women with incontinence pads on, and that's how I sort of started seeing what aged care was like. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice to age with dignity and not have to worry about that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm quite passionate about that. Even though it's not life threatening, it can be socially limiting as well, and not good for you.
No.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us.
Yes, that's great. Thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed chatting to you. I hope you've got lots of information there. It's a bit of a overload, but it's good to have it, right?
No, it was good. We need to talk about it even more.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks, Lynda.
Thanks, Tracy. See ya. Bye.
Hey, thanks for listening to today's podcast. Can I ask you a favour? If our conversation spoke to you today, could you please take a moment to leave a 5-star review? Your review will help people discover this podcast, and together we can create a world where there's even more love and more laughter. And if you want to hear more from the Project Joyful podcast, just click the subscribe button. Bye for now.